Some of the reading that I had done and the pictures that I had seen showed total submission. I had eventually started using some of this bondage and discipline with my own son, and it had escalated to the point where I was putting a large Ziploc bag over his head and taping it around his neck with black duct tape or black electrical tape and raping and molesting him at that point.
Hi, welcome to 10-Minute Murder, brief and bingeable true crime. My name is Joe, I'm the host, and thank you for joining today. The episode you're about to hear deserves a very clear and obvious warning. It's disturbing, it's disgusting, and I honestly considered not doing it at all. But I feel like we all need to be reminded from time to time that people like this exist in this world. Sick individuals that prey on the most vulnerable and easily manipulated. They're out there roaming the streets looking for their next victim. And I know that comes across as a little bit overdramatic, but it's the truth. The episode is a little bit different today in that you won't be hearing me talk as much, but you'll be hearing a lot from the actual killer. The episode today is about pulling back the curtain, letting you inside the mind of a real-life monster. BTW, if you're new to 10-Minute Murder, please subscribe wherever you're listening right now, so that you can easily find the show again later, as well as listen to past episodes. And you can hear new ones as soon as they are released if you're a subscriber. Connect on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc. All the links are in the show notes of this episode. Now, to today's story. Gerald Bordelon was born on February 19, 1962. He grew up in Louisiana, going to school in Baton Rouge. Gerald was considered mentally impaired, and because of that, he was put into a special resource class before his mother pulled him out of school altogether after she was advised to do so by the principal. Doctors believe that Bordelon suffered from antisocial personality disorder, as well as sexual sadism disorder, even though he had an IQ in the normal range. Antisocial personality disorder is what some people call sociopath, and the characteristics of someone with APD include hostility, significant irritability, agitation, aggression, or violence, lack of empathy for others, and lack of remorse about harming others, so they're not very fun at parties. And sexual sadism disorder is the condition of experiencing sexual arousal in response to the extreme pain, suffering, or humiliation of others. Super not chill either. And Gerald had both, according to doctors. In March of 1982, he offered a ride to a young lady not much over the age of 18. Soon after she hopped in the car, Gerald pulled a knife, took her to her house, and forced oral sex on her. For that crime, he was caught and admitted guilt. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Gerald was paroled early for good behavior, and on June 14, 1990, a woman was grabbed by Bordelon and abducted at knife point. He took the woman to an abandoned building where he forced oral sex on her. Bordelon then raped her. The exact same MO is what landed him in prison the first time. He was convicted of forcible rape and 2 counts of aggravated crime against nature and sentenced to 20 years in prison. In 2000, after being paroled early yet again, Bordelon began working at Delta Concrete. During that time, he began internet chatting with a woman named Jennifer, and I don't know how to say her last name. It's spelled Kocké, and I don't want to say it wrong, so there's that. And maybe you're thinking that she must not have known how disgusting his criminal past was. She knew. She knew, and she not only dated him, but the two got married in 2001. They moved to Gloucester, Mississippi in October, living in a trailer on land owned by Bordelon's parents. Around Christmas of 2001, Jennifer's daughters told her that Gerald had molested them. Jennifer alerted Child Protective Services, and he was forced to leave. The couple then separated, and Jennifer returned to Louisiana with her family. And despite this, she remained in contact with Bordelon. At one point, she was having a problem with something electrical at her home. Gerald was an electrician, so she had him come over and fix the issue. And while doing that, he shocked himself. Literally shocked himself almost to death. But Courtney, one of the little girls that had reported Gerald of molestation the year before, performed CPR on him and saved his life. On November 15, 2002, 12-year-old Courtney LeBlanc, who had saved Gerald's life, disappeared from her home in Denham Springs, Louisiana. Initially, they thought that Courtney may have just run away from home. As time went on and there was still no sign of her, police thought that maybe she was a victim of a serial killer named Derek Todd Lee, who was operating in the area at that time, but this theory was later dismissed. Investigation then focused on Gerald Bordelon, and he was placed under surveillance. He was questioned by the police, and it didn't take long before he admitted to kidnapping and murdering Courtney. On November 26, 2002, Bordelon led investigators to Courtney's body. He said that he took her from the home with a knife. He took her to Mississippi, where he forced oral sex on her before driving her back to Louisiana. And when they got back, he strangled her to death on the bank near a river and then dumped her body in a wooded area in the Livingston Parish. Gearld was found guilty of first-degree murder on June 29, 2006, and was sentenced to death the following day. He waived all appeals because he said he would commit a similar crime again if he was ever given the opportunity. Courtney's mother, just in case you're wondering, in October 2003, Jennifer was found guilty of felonious child abuse in connection with the murder of Courtney. She was sentenced to a suspended 5-year term with 5 years probation. Okay, back to Gerald Bordelon. While on death row, he agreed to interviews with a couple people. Obviously the FBI, who wanted to know more about him and how his mind works for profiling purposes, and also Dr. Anna Salter, who is an author and expert on sexual predators. What you're going to hear is from that interview, and Gearld, once in prison, admitted to so many more sick and disgusting crimes against people and children. Crimes that he was never charged with. And again, heads up, this is extremely graphic.
This next man, Gerald, is a sadistic sex offender. As he'll tell us, he is sexually aroused by inflicting pain. The victim he's describing is his 9-year-old stepson.
After about 2 years of molesting my son and all the pornography that I had been buying, renting, swapping, I had gotten my hands on some bondage and discipline pornography with children involved. Some of the reading that I had done and the pictures that I had seen showed total submission. I had eventually started using some of this bondage and discipline with my own son, and it had escalated to the point where I was putting a large Ziploc bag over his head and taping it around his neck with black duct tape or black electrical tape, and raping and molesting him at that point, to the point that he would turn blue, pass out. At that point, I would rip the bag off his head, not for fear of hurting him, but because of the excitement. I was extremely aroused by inflicting pain. When I seen him pass out and change colors, that was very arousing and heightening to me. And I would rip the bag off his head, and then I'd jump up on his chest and I'd masturbate in his face, and while he was coughing and choking, I would rape him in the mouth. I used the same sadistic styled act of the plastic bag and the tape 2-3 times a week, and that went on for, I'd say, a little over a year. If I hadn't been arrested when I was, my stepson would be dead. I would have killed him. I had been fantasizing about killing a victim during the course of rape or molest, about 5 or 6 months. I believe it would have been maybe as short as another month or 2, and I would have actually killed him if I was not arrested.
Gerald's sadistic attacks continued, despite the fact that his stepson reported him repeatedly. No one believed the child.
It was reported to my wife and my parents, probably 6 or 7 different times. And there was actually one instance where I went to the police station myself to turn myself in. And the officer at the desk told me to go home and sleep off my drunk. And I left.
He had molested children from ages 4 to 16, with a preference for 10 to 14-year-old boys.
I've been raping and molesting for over a period of 25 years, and I have in excess of 300 victims.
Hands-on victims?
All hands-on victims.
How did you get access to so many victims?
Children are on the street all the time. I created my own opportunities. There were children at stores. I had picked some children up at the stores, at penny arcades, and I have snatched some off the street.
Gerald covered up his raping and molesting by living what might be called the double life. Friends and associates had no clue he was a violent man.
I believe I feel more that I led a triple life. I was one way at home, I was one way at work, and I was a different way in the community. When I was at home, I was a molesting monster. When I was in the community, I was more of a stalker. I would be stalking people, stalking children, looking for victims. When I was more with my employers or the in crowd that I was in, it was something, I was completely different as, I'm the perfect individual, have a good paying job, drive a nice car, dress nice, and go to a lot of high class, fancy places. This is what I would portray to the people that I wanted them to see, my friends, my employers, business associates. This is what I would portray to them.
In January 2010, Gerald Bordelon had a meal of fried fish topped with crawfish etouffee, a peanut butter and apple jelly sandwich, and chocolate chip cookies. After that, he was executed by lethal injection. That's 10-Minute Murder for today. Brief and bingeable true crime. Thanks for listening, and if you are a new listener to this podcast, or if maybe you're an OG listener but have never taken the chance to subscribe, you can do that right now. Wherever you're listening, find the button that makes you subscribe. It doesn't always say subscribe. They try to trick you, I think. I think it's a trick. It's some kind of scam by big podcast that's trying to pull one over on you. Sometimes it says follow. It might say connect, subscribe. There's a host of different things, but they all mean the same thing, essentially. Every time you open the app, your subscribed or your followed podcasts are right there and easily accessible. So that's what I'm asking you to do so that you can quickly come back to this podcast whenever you want to listen to it. I'm not forcing you to listen to the podcast, just forcing you to be able to find it easily. It helps me and it helps you. So it's a win-win. You can also connect with the podcast on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just go to any of those platforms that you want to connect with the show on and type 10-Minute Murder into the search bar, and it's going to pop right up. If you want to link to everywhere you can find the podcast listening, as well as social media and the merch store, just go to 10minutemurder.com. That's where all the information lives, 10minutemurder.com. Thank you for listening. Be safe and make good choices.